Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you my Gina Designs design team project for July 2019. The challenge or theme or whatever this month for the design team is Tag Your It. So I decided to make a little tag book out of some shipping tags and then another cardstock tag that someone had sent me in Happy Mail. It's a little bit larger. I needed something to be slightly larger for the cover of the book. So I took 3 manila tags and I painted them on both sides using some Traditions paint from DecoArt. And um, it's a dark brown. My color scheme idea in my head when I was thinking about this project a couple years ago, brown with pastel pink or pastel blue became really popular. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was in all the clothing. It was like brown clothes that were accented with these pastel colors. And I was thinking about that when I was looking at that printed larger tag, just thinking about pastel colors because it's summer and that's kind of where I'm at right now in my color palette, and then also thinking about how they coordinate with the color brown. So this raw umber color from the Traditions line from DecoArt just seemed like a nice rich brown, and then I decided to um, mix pastel colors to go along. Now Gina Designs has a whole bunch of new stencil designs, and I got the ones called Foursquare, and you saw me flip through them there, but they basically have 4 designs on each little 6x6 stencil. And in most cases, these designs are layerable. And so I wanted to try to use them in the way they were designed, which is to kind of layer on top of each other. I think I was pretty successful, but the way that I decided to do this, since the background is so dark, I decided to use gesso first. So I wanted to make the solid shapes that are on each, like there's a solid shape and then there's some other shapes that you can layer on top. So I started with this heavy gesso from Liquitex because I wanted to really make a a light area with each shape that I could um, make sure that when I put the other colors over the top that they would be bright, because I just didn't think that, you have to think about opacity of paints and what they look like over a dark background. And basically, whenever you're using a dark background, unless you've got something very opaque, it is not going to show up. So I stenciled the designs on the pages, well, the tags, which are going to be made into pages first using this heavy gesso. And I cut out a lot of this. I mean, I did it on the front and the back. So there ends up being 12 pages total in this book by the time it's all folded and, your fronts and backs. The I don't know, the downfall of this method that I used is that you have to line the stencil back up on top pretty well. And if you're not careful and get it really lined up, then it kind of tends to blur the edges of your images. And I'm not that careful of a person. I'm not that, I don't sit there and, measure it inch by inch. So in some cases, I didn't do a very good job, but I fixed it in the end. So then the next thing I did was I took ultramarine blue, hands of yellow, phthalo green blue, and then this electric pink from the Americana DecoArt line, and I mixed each of them with opaque white. DecoArt Traditions line has this color called opaque white, which is basically going to end up being your titanium white, but it is really opaque. So I was able to mix down those intense colors into tints of themselves, which means pastels. And in addition to that, adding the opaque white to the colors then makes them opaque. So now I can go over my shapes and I will come out with a light color that is opaque and will cover up anything in the background in most cases. Now the phthalo green blue is kind of a turquoise, so it came out like a light turquoise, and then the hands yellow is a pale yellow. The ultramarine blue came out like a sky blue color, and then the electric pink came out as a pastel pink. So it worked really good. Then I started to layer the colors on, in some cases blending two different colors on a solid shape, and then also using the different shapes on each 4 square stencil on top of each other to make a multi-layered shape, print, whatever you want to call it. So I believe that these were the way they were designed to work, is to either be used individually or to layer on top of each other. So I'm layering them. I'm also lining them up and coloring in. Had I realized that I was going to be putting the opaque white in with the colors, I probably could have skipped the whole gesso step, but I just really didn't know at the time that I did it what I was going to do, if that makes sense. And I guess maybe the gesso does serve a purpose. It does make it brighter underneath each image so that they really can show up on the dark background. But I think it's interesting the coordination of the brown with the pastels was kind of what I was thinking about when I made this. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Because I have a hard time, as you can see right now, I'm like trying to find the right place to line up. And in some cases, I just really didn't line it up very well. And so I ended up with a little bit of smeary stuff. I did take a brush with some of the raw sienna and try to touch up in some areas where I got paint underneath the stencil or I moved the stencil too soon and smeared the paint. But yeah, this was supposed to be a quick project. It ended up taking me almost 3 hours. I was surprised. So there is some skipping in this video of stuff or some high speed, 8 times fast speed up, just so that you can see what I did. So I like blending the colors together with a sponge, it's particularly the pink and the yellow. It ends up kind of making maybe even a little bit of a peachy color when you blend the two together by going over it, but like making all yellow, then going over it with a little bit of pink, and then coming back in with the yellow sponge and blending it. I like that. I also like to blending the blue and the greenish turquoise color together. So I thought it was fun. Like I said, there did end up being 12 pages in the book, and at the end of the video, there are always photos, and you'll be able to see all 12 together on one slide so that you can see what they look like. Some of them ended up being my favorites, and some of them ended up being, meh. Didn't like them that much. But the more I worked on it, the more layers I put on, with even coming back in some cases, with the raw sienna over the top. If you just keep going and layering with the stencils, you'll end up with something that you like. So that's this one right here is where I really had a problem lining the stencil up and not making a big smeary mess. So I really ended up doing something different with that one in the end. But I just couldn't get those little spiky edges to line up. And then once I did finally line up, then I got paint underneath the stencil and smeared it, and then all the little spiky edges went away. I'm like, driving me crazy. It's making me crazy. But I do enjoy how the stencils stack on top of each other. I think that's a really cool concept. I used to have some stamps a long time ago that did that. They were called two-step stamps. And I know that there's still people out there making those type of stamps that come, one on top of another on top of another. In fact, Gina just has some stamps like that in her Etsy shop that you can do a light color with a solid and then stamp a darker color over the top with some of the other stamps that fit inside, similar to these stencils. But fun new stencils, and she's coming out with even more. She has, I think, 6 new designs coming out soon. So watch for those and check out the Etsy store. Of course, I'll have all the links to the things that I used in the description box below the video, like I always do, and link to Gina's store as well as my coupon code, which is Shel 15, gives you 15% off Gina's products in her Etsy shop if you use my code. So you can always do that too. So this tag I was intending to be the center page, the centerfold. So I continued the design all the way across instead of making 2 different designs on either side. I just went ahead all the way across with it. And I'm using some of the layering stencils on this one, which I don't know, it might be my favorite. I might actually like this particular one with the little kind of a tulip design on it, maybe the best of all the 4 square ones that I got this time. And it has like little dotty things and curly swirly things that you can put on the flower, and then there's also another one that has some like kind of stitchy looking stuff that you can put over the top, which I ended up using the raw sienna over the top on one of them. Maybe it's on the front of the book actually, I think, with that stitchy looking one that comes on the 4 square. Here's where I am finally adding back in some brown over the top, which is what I should have been doing. I should have been putting the raw sienna over the top with some of the little dotty things the whole time, because that really does make it look a little bit more finished. And continuing to color in. I like this square design with the multiple squares, but I did tape off. It has some dots around it, and I taped them off. You can see the masking tape on the stencil. I didn't want the dots, I just wanted the squares. So you can always mask off sections of your stencils with any type of tape, and then you won't use that part when you're stenciling. You can, of course, can just try to take your sponge and not hit the parts that you don't want while you're stenciling. That's another way to do it if you don't feel like masking, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes you don't really control where that pesky little sponge wants to go. It sometimes has a mind of its own. So I am using cosmetic sponges this time. These are just cheap ones from the dollar store. Um, I sometimes use other tools to stencil. And I started out with one of my sponge pouncers, but ended up just going with the cosmetic sponges because I wanted a sponge for each color that I was doing. So this time I used the um, brown raw sienna color, I mean raw umber color, to just do like some shading. And that particular page there on the left kind of turned out as probably my favorite of all of them. I think it has the most depth to it because of the shading. And if I wasn't like really worrying about time and how much time this was taking, I would have went back in and maybe put some shading on some of the other ones with the brown. Like maybe those tulips would have been cool with like a shadow on each edge, using the stencil over the top again with the raw sienna. And maybe I will do that. But I was worried about how much time it was taking and how I knew I was going to need to edit this thing into 20 minutes. And it was getting longer and longer and longer. So the next thing I did was to take my white Posca pen, and also I did use a brown Posca pen at some point, to add a little detail, a little doodling over my pages. And this little booklet isn't intended to, the pages aren't intended to be the end. It's kind of like a pre-started photo album or something like that. or a little tiny art journal where you can go over these backgrounds and do something else with them. Maybe with the same stencils, or maybe put some photos on them or something else. It's not intended to be the end of the project, if you know what I mean. It's like a little, I think it would be a cute little baby photo album to put some little snapshots of your child or grandchild as a little book to have you carry with you to show, oh, look at my pictures. It'd be a little bit cuter than just having plain pictures to show or showing off your phone. It'd be cute to stick them in here. So that was kind of my concept. I don't have a grandchild, and my children are too old to be in a little flip book at this point, but I liked the idea of it. I thought it was a good idea. I couldn't, I mean, I wasn't going to go search baby pictures and put them in here just for demonstration purposes. You can do a project like this and make it into whatever you want. Of course, I have tons of these manila tags that will probably last me long past when I've passed on. I'll pass down in my will my manila tags because I have so many. But this is a good type of a project to use them up. I could have made even more pages if I wanted to and made the book a little bit fatter. I could have made a little um, pleat in the fold in the back of the book and made it wider and put more pages in it. That's absolutely something you could do by, instead of scoring the tag in half, by scoring, I'm talking about the one that's on the as the cover. You could make two scores and then make like a little spine on the back and sew more than one signature of tags inside of it. So now I am decorating the front, and it was already printed. It's got uh, roses and pastel pink and green on a kind of a tannish, manila-ish colored background. And so I sponged the edges all the way around the tag and on the spine with some brown potting soil ink and a little artist sponge. Um, just sponged all the edges. Then I took that kind of, it's a rectangle shape with swoopy edges, and made a shape in the sienna color to tie in with the inside pages. And then I stenciled the tulip shape over the top, stenciled some of the some dots around, and the overlapping stencil over the top of the tulip with the sienna again, just to bring in the same type of shapes that I have on the inside, and the same colors, of course, all the same colors. And then I sewed in the signature, um, made sure that everything was real lined up, and clipped it down so that it wouldn't move. That always helps to clip them so that you don't get slippage as you're trying to poke holes. I used a pokey tool to poke three holes in it, and then a um, uh, big needle and some linen thread to sew in the signature, going in through and then back out and across and in and back out, just your standard stitching. And then I tied it in a knot in the center of the book so that now all the pages are in. And then to finish up, I did add some more pin work with some Posca pins. This is where I was using the brown Posca pin. It's not the same color as the sienna, though. I wished it was darker, but it wasn't. Then I added a ribbon to the tag, because that outer book is a tag. So I added a ribbon to it like you would on a tag. And then I wanted some type of ribbon to tie all the way around it. And I had got out that pink, but it just wasn't the right color. It was too dull. So I took some seam binding washable seam binding, which is just white, and you can change these to any color that you want. So I just use the leftover paint in my sponges to sponge it all the different colors, all the different pastel colors, and just made sure that I got it all the way through, dried it, and then I tied it all the way around and through the hole, and then tied it in a bow to keep it shut. And I'm not going to untie it. I just slide that little, the book is a little bit flexible because it's made out of cardstock. So I can just kind of fold it a little bit and slide that belly band off and on very easily. So I don't need to untie everything. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.